I know that a lot of the media is pushing for women and men to separate and for all of this negativity basically surrounding men. I believe that we've already went through the women's negative phase, and what's happening now is we're going through the men's negative phase, and in this we're being pushed into separate corners, and it's almost as though we are being pushed in separate corners to reflect on our own how we show up in these dynamics when it's relating to the opposite sex. And I know that it is an intentional effort by the powers that be, the false leaders, to create this division in households, in unions, in whatever dynamics that they can, where they are promoting this separation, where they are promoting pitting one against the other. Because again, we are all undergoing multiple wars on a day-to-day basis, where it is not just the class war, where it's not just the race war, where it's not just the gender war, it's not just the spiritual war. There are wars, within battles, within wars. And it's layered intentionally because it is meant to create the most optimal division possible. And with these divisions, we are all going in our separate corners again to where we can recognize and reflect. And it is not their intention for us to recognize and to reflect on how we are showing up in these dynamics. What their ultimate agenda was division and complete and total annihilation of any sort of unit. Because if we are all divided down to the smallest thing, even in our own households, we cannot come together to fight against anything that is fighting against us. And ultimately, if we're not fighting back against them, they win by default. But what's actually happening is we are going into these separations where we recognize where we could have shown up better, where we recognize why we do need the other, and how the balance between the two is necessary for us to continue on. And ultimately, what's going to happen is we will go through this separation process where it is probably a few years, where birth rates do decline, where people gain autonomy in ways that hasn't been seen in decades, years. And then eventually, everyone will be healthy enough, the people who survival of the fittest, the people who are healthy enough to come back into union will come back into union or come into union, and then they will lead the way for all of us to come back into union within these groups, within the households, whatever way. But the separation is meant to be permanent, it's meant to be long lasting, it's meant to be devastating. But anything they do against us always turns for our benefit, because they are so short-sighted, and there's always a way. There's always a way made. So eventually, after enough people have healed on their own and they've had the freedom to do so without the children, without the other sex in their household, they will recognize the ways that they wish they had someone to show up for them, because they've shown up in all of these ways for themselves. But if they had the opposite gender, it would be optimal. So eventually, these breakdowns in the units will reform in ways that benefit society as a whole, and people will come together. There are people who will lead because they will be the first, and then more and more waves of people will come back into union with the opposite of them. And then as we are healing on these individual levels, and then in the unions, we can heal within these larger groups in society. And that's when we push back. That's when we all decide enough is enough, because we recognize that our differences aren't so different after all. We are all struggling in one way. We all have strengths in another way. And once we can see this, after taking time alone to recognize our own personal strengths and our own personal weaknesses and the ways that we didn't contribute and the ways that we did contribute, after we get there, only after we get there, we'll be able to come back into union, and then in these larger groups come back into each other as a whole and work together to eradicate that which has been oppressing us, suppressing us, stopping us, hindering us, blocking us. So all of this separation will aid us. It will benefit us in the long run, especially as more women are not having children, because children are, despite how lovely and how wonderful and how much we need them, because we do need them. They show us ourselves. They mirror us ourselves in so many different ways. They are, in some ways, especially to women, a hindrance in their life because more often than not, the roles fall onto the women. The illnesses, the calling out, all of the labor falls onto women. So women have been shorted and slighted in so many ways through the patriarchy, through being the ones that have to hold down the fort. The women have been the ones who have taken the brunt. So the women stand to gain the most through this separation with men. And as we come into this separation and we see it on a grand, large scale, because these are still just the beginning waves where women are opting out of sex, opting out of giving birth, opting out of engaging with men in mass. These are just the beginning waves, and we will eventually see this on a grand scale where women have just taken their power back in every way, and then they become the deciders of the fates. They begin to be the ones who decide if a man's legacy is continued. They become the ones to decide if a man gets to be in the household. All of these roles are going to flip on their head after this separation period that we will be going through. And it is necessary for the grand healing of the wider collective, not just the family units, not just in personal senses. It is necessary for the wider collective to recognize all parts of the whole and how each part of the whole functions for the greater good of the whole.